Hello everyone, here is a video demo of the vector landscape tutorial that we'll have gone through in class, but I'm going to do it from scratch using the PDF that you guys will all have access to, and I'm going to keep it on the left side of my screen here and leave plenty of room for Adobe Illustrator on the right. So the first step is to create a new document. So you're going to go to File, New, and let's move this out of the way here to see what we got. I will give it my last name underscore vector demo or something of that nature. We're going to set this to points, or rather pixels actually, for px. So we will do 1000 pixels wide by 1500 pixels tall. So it should be portrait orientation. We only need one artboard. We don't need to play around with any of that. For the advanced options, our color mode is at RGB. We want our raster effects to be 300, and we can click create. Now on to step 2. So the artboard isn't much in itself right now. Ooh, let's get the toolbar over here. So to lay down our color, the actual first thing we're going to do is draw a rectangle across the entire size of our artboard. So you can just click and drag, and then when you see the pink snap guides, you are good. And it's set to default with a white fill and a black stroke, but now we are going to actually use gradients. So I'm going to remove the stroke, so I just clicked on stroke and now I can click on none. And now we are going to go to the gradient panel, which if you don't see it on the right, you can go up to window and scroll down until you see gradient, and it pops up looking like this. And we are just going to, actually let's put that in there. Good. So we'll click on the gradient to activate it. Oh, now you see it, my stroke was up front, so it applied it to the stroke. So I'm just going to click the bent arrow to put it as the fill. And then I'm going to set my stroke to none again. Then I'll click on the fill to bring it forward. Good, okay. So now back to the gradient panel. We are going to customize with some colors. We don't want it to be black and white. We want it to match the colors that we have here. So if we take a look, if we move the white, we can see that it has more prominence in the space, and the closer together that these sliders are, the less room for transition space between the colors. So we'll keep them at the opposite ends. If we take a look at the instructions, we want to set the angle right here to 90 degrees. So now the gradient's going up and down instead of side to side. And now we're going to add 2 more handles to the slider. If you just hover below the bar, you will see a white arrow with a plus sign. You can click once and twice. Good, so now we are going to double click on the first slider, and we don't have a color right now, so just click on this little menu here and change it to RGB to bring up the option where we can actually choose colors. You can go over to your PDF and actually highlight and copy. I just hit Command C, the color code. So again, I'll double click on the slider that I want to affect, and I'm going to paste the code, and there's our first color. And we will do the same here. I just double click, copy, double click the slider, double click the number, and Command V to paste, and hit enter to apply. And then we'll go back here, Command C, double click the slider, double click the number, Command V, hit enter. Same again, double click the number, Command C, back to the gradient, double click the slider, change this one to RGB, double click, and Command V. There we go. And now we want to match the sliders as well. So we're going to bring this one in just a bit. And then we want to bring all these just a little closer together, because we don't want the lightest shade to be so far away. If you take a look over here, you can see it in its full length. we do want to drag this in a bit. So it looks like that is about right. Just make sure that there's even enough spacing that there's a smooth transition between the colors. So now we can move on to step 3. All right. So let's use our selection tool just to click off of our shape. And actually in our layers panel, let's name this one background. And let's make a new layer for us to continue. Our drawing mode is on just the default, draw normal, so you can leave that. Now we are going to use the pen tool to draw kind of mountain shapes. And you want to start kind of about halfway, maybe a little lower than halfway. You're going to start off the board. And let's set our fill to none, and we'll let our stroke be black. So now you're just going to try to make kind of organic shapes to kind of imitate a mountain range. You can click and kind of drag and be a little bit more rugged than we normally are, but also don't forget some important slopes. So don't be afraid to click and drag to get the handles. I don't want to see just a bunch of zigzags across the page. And now we're going to go off the artboard and we're going to click all the way around so that there's kind of an overhang. And don't forget to close the shape. Good. So now remember that you are able to zoom in close, and if there's any one that kind of stands out to you, any anchor that doesn't really look right, remember that you can hold Command, click on an anchor, and use your direct selection tool to kind of pull it in another direction. Remember, you can also hold Alt and click and drag to change things up as well. That kind of looks wonky though, so we're gonna not do that. But you can also hold Alt and click and drag parts of a path, right, to make things a little bit different. And I don't want that there, so good. All right, don't get too hung up on the shapes, just try to keep things kind of organic looking. And now let's add some color. So right now this is the shape that is currently selected. And now we are going to go back to our gradient panel. And we're going to click on the gradient to activate it. But again, you see my stroke was in front, so make sure you hit the bent arrow to bring the fill up front. And I'm going to click on the fill to again bring it forward. Let's go back to the gradient panel. Now we are going to set the gradient back to 90 degrees. This time we only need 2 sliders, so we are going to delete 2 of them, and you can tell that this one's selected because it's white, the others are gray. And now we have some designated colors to use, and they're over here. So we're going to double click, copy, and double click the slider, double click the number and paste, and double click the number, double click the slider, and paste. All right, and now take a look at how the sliders look. The darker one is much further to the right, and the lighter one is also much further to the right. So we really just want the dark area to be more so on the tips of the mountains. And if you spread out your gradient panel, you can see even more options here. Where actually, so give this a try, if we put the dark slider all the way over here and the light slider all the way here, we can then play around with this gradient slider up here that helps dictate where the transition really starts. So you can play around with that to make it even smoother. So I'm going to have that right about there, and I'm happy with that. So now we're going to add more to the mountain range. So you're going to grab your pen tool, and you are going to start drawing another kind of hillside in front of it. I left my gradient fill on, that's fine. Do your best not to have this mountain range overlap with the one that you just did, and make sure that it's not too similar. Make sure you go over the edge and close the shape. You don't need to worry about being neat for this part. We'll go to the gradient, And now we have two new numbers. So the first one will always be the left slider. Paste. Copy. Double click. And paste. All right, and again, the setup that we have is pretty good, so there's no need to change it, I don't think. We have the dark part just along the tips. And now we will do a third range. And you're actually going to do 4 in total, so be prepared to draw 2 more. So again, just, oh, that was a little too cartoony. I'm going to Command Z a little bit. Again, do your best not to have them overlap. You're going to see why a little bit later. And just make sure it's around the edge of the artboard. And now in the gradient panel, we have 2 new numbers. I'll take that one. Always just copy and pasting. Here we go. Again, I'd say that where the sliders are is perfectly fine. And let's do another one. So you'll notice that the kind of mountains that are closer are a bit more level. They don't have as many drastic peaks. And that's just kind of a stylistic preference. And now let's do our 2 new numbers, our last 2 here. Double click and paste, enter. Oh. And good. So I think that I'm going to make the dark tips a little bit more prominent. Oh, that's not what I wanted. No, oh my goodness. I want this to move a bit. There we go. All right, and now step number 6 is to add our kind of lowest and flattest shape. So for this one, you can kind of just do really casual, low slung curves. And this last shape, it's not going to be a gradient, it's actually going to be a solid color. So down here, you have your option for solid color, gradient, and none, and right now it's on gradient, so you want to choose solid color. And the color that we're going to use is this one here. So copy it, and then if you double click here, paste and hit enter, then you have your final color. Good, all right, so that's all of our mountain ranges. Now we are going to just make these blend a little bit more by selecting these 3 middle mountains. So I'm going to click 1, hold shift, click 2, and 3. I'm going to go up to opacity, and I'm going to drop it down to 70% and hit enter. So we just get a bit more of a smoother transition between the colors. And that's why we didn't want any of the mountains overlapping, because if they were, you would be able to see through them, and that's not what we want. So I'll put that back where it belongs. And in our layers panel, we are going to name these layers midground. Now for step number 8, to create our sun, we're going to make a new layer. And we are going to use the ellipse tool. You can hold shift and alt to make your sun nice and big. And we are going to use a gradient. So we'll go to the gradient panel, and this time instead of having a linear gradient, we're going to have a radial one. And the colors that we need are right here. So you're going to copy, the first one's going to be the left slider. Second one will be the right slider. There we go. And I'd say you're pretty good with having the sliders at either end. You can click on this little slider here to activate it and play around till you're happy. I think it's good more so on the right. There we go. And now we want to move it so that it's actually going to be behind the mountains, because if I were to use my selection tool to click and drag it, it would be sitting on top of the mountains. So an easy way you can do this is to just simply rearrange your layers. You can click and drag this underneath midground, and there you go. You could also right click on the shape, or rather click on it once to activate, right click, go to arrange, and say send backward. Well, let's see, will it not work because it's on its own layer? I think because it's on its own layer, it's not going to work. What if we said send to back? No, okay, so we actually do need to manually drag this underneath midground, and that's fine. Okay, now we are going to add a nice outer glow to the sun using some effects that we are familiar with, but they do act differently. So in the main menu, you're going to go to Effect, then underneath Illustrator Effects right here, not Photoshop Effects. Illustrator, you're going to go to Stylize, Outer Glow. Now you can click and drag your dialog box over here. You can click Preview so you can see what it's going to look like. And we're going to change the color code to this one here. And you just have to double click on the color to get it. And then we're going to change the mode to color dodge. We'll change the opacity to 100% and the blur to 100 px. And you can click OK. It's going to take a moment for it to process, but you can see that the outer glow has taken effect. If you can't see it, just drag the sun up and you'll see behind a darker, or on a darker setting, the outer glow a bit more, but let's drag it back down. There we go. Now we're going to create a moon. And this can be on the same layer, pardon me, as the sun. So we can call this layer sun and moon. So now we'll set our fill to white and our stroke to none. Let's use the ellipse tool, and we're going to draw 2 circles, or rather you can just draw one and then use your selection tool and hold Alt to make a second one. Once you have done that, you can select both shapes, use your shape builder tool, and hold Alt to subtract parts of the shape that you don't need. And we'll put this high up in kind of the dark corner. And now we can change the moon's outer glow and transparency. So again, we'll go to Effect, Stylize, Outer Glow. The setting, the color is actually going to be the same. It's going to be color dodge. Opacity is at 100, but blur this time is only going to be at 20. And you can click OK. And then the transparency of the moon overall, drop it down to 25 or 30%. There you go, you get a kind of nice faded effect. And now we're going to add some stars to our sky. So we're going to zoom in and draw a circle that's very small. Hold Shift while you do it, and then zoom in even closer. And now we are going to go to Effect at the top. We're going to go to Distort. We're going to go to Pucker. And then what we want to do is we want to change this to -60. And we get this nice little instant star shape. Now if we zoom out, we are going to zoom back in and we're going to reduce the size of the star drastically. So we're going to hold Shift and make this even smaller. There we go. Now we're going to find the symbols panel, and if it's not here, you can go to Window, scroll down until you find Symbols. Now we're going to click on the new layer icon, and we're going to name this Star. And there it is now. So now we can delete this initial shape that we had. So now what we're going to do, step 15, is we are going to spray the sky with stars. See a little spray can icon down here? This is called the symbol sprayer tool. And you get a circle that's going to be kind of your brush tool, so you can use your square brackets to make it as big or as small as you like. And all you have to do is click and drag all over the sky to create a random assortment of stars. Feel free to put as many or as few as you like. You might want more concentrated on the top and then more sporadically along the bottom. It's whatever you prefer. Fill in any gaps that you think are a bit too apparent. And now, if you right click, pardon me, we can now play around with the symbol sizer tool, which if we hover over group and click, then any of the stars that fall within the circle of our mouse are going to become bigger. And if you click and hold, they'll become much bigger. We don't want that, so we're going to hit Command Z again. Just one little click here and there should be fine. And note as well that holding Alt instead will decrease the size of stars. So this is just to add some variety to the shape, give it a more natural appearance. Now, something important to note in your layers panel, be sure to arrange so that your group of symbols is actually underneath the moon, because in real life we wouldn't have any stars, pardon me, above it. And actually, because we've messed around with the opacity, I wonder, are we able to select a single star? Oh no, we're not. So I might actually just move my moon so that it doesn't have stars overlapping. There we go, that's fine. That's fine for now. Alright, so we did the symbol sizer. Now something that's pretty cool is if we make sure we have our stars selected. Oh, sorry, the symbol selected. The symbol screener tool, which again is underneath here, this is going to play around with the opacity of the stars. So some will appear brighter than others. Some will appear duller. There we go. So once this is complete, with our symbol selected, we can change the opacity of everything down to about 40%, and we get a much more natural appearance. Now finally for our silhouette. So actually, you know what I'm going to do? I want to move everything down a bit. I want to move, let's see, pardon me. I'd like to move all the mountains down, maybe up a little bit more, and then I want to move the sun down as well. There we go. Just kind of a bit more of a dynamic scene, I think. You know what? I don't like where the moon is, so I'm going to resize it. And I like it better when it's, whoops. I like it better when it's more upright. So I think I will keep that as the general shape. Let's move that over a bit. Good. All right, now, pardon me, we're going to go to the edge of the artboard, and we're going to use something called the blob brush. If you just right click your paintbrush tool, and we're going to eye drop actually so that our color is the same as the foreground. And now with that paintbrush tool, you are going to simply draw a cactus shape. And notice how it looks a little shaky when you first do it, but when you release, it smooths it out for you. Now, if yours has an outer glow on it, go to your layers panel and select your object. And then go to window, open up your appearance panel, and if you see that there's an outer glow on it, delete the outer glow. And you can just drag your appearance panel into here when you're done. Good. And now back to painting. You can change the size of your brush just like you did in Photoshop using the square brackets. Just want to make a cactus. There we go. Good. And then once you've made your shape, you are able to select it and click and drag it. Now the reason why we can't see it right now, because silly me, I drew it while on the sun and moon layer. So I gotta click and drag it and put it at the top of the midground. So there is one cactus. And then just draw a few more of varying sizes. You can zoom in, make them a little skinnier, some more kind of irregular shapes. Use your selection tool, click and drag. Oh my goodness, it went back to there again. All right, there we go. And you can transform the size. Whoops. Make sure that you have the right object selected. There we go. So we can make that one smaller. Make it kind of really in the distance if we want. And a nice little cheat as well. Not cheat, a clever way to operate is that you can always do simple hacks like turn them the other way, make them wider, duplicate them, different sizes. So now we can make this one taller, skinnier, transform, reflect again, this one over here. And there you go. Not too bad at all. You can even zoom in real close if you like. And you can paint right on here with a really nice thin brush. And just do kind of little blades of grass or something if that's a detail that you would like to include. Kind of little tufts of like tumbleweed stuff or something, I don't know. Doesn't need to be anything overly fancy. And there you have it. So that is just a little introduction to how you might go about making your very own vector landscape. I think the only thing that I would do differently is I would make another layer and I would label it foreground, and I would put my cacti and my solid piece of ground as my foreground. There we go. So we have a background sky, sun, moon, and stars, our midground mountains, and our foreground. Awesome. Now, when it comes to saving this, if you go to File, Save As, you are able to save it as an Adobe PDF. And when you do save it as that, it is only going to save what's on the artboard. So all this overhang won't even exist for you. All right, so hope you enjoyed it. Hope you're proud of what you made, and be sure to submit it on Google Classroom for review. Good work, everyone.